Alright, and so this video continuing to work on the fuel tanks, as you can see. I've enlisted the assistance of my daughter to help dimple the skins here. This is the left tank for the fuel tanks. In this example, I believe in the previous video I'd ended off with sanding or marking up the areas in between the tape on the fuel tanks, getting ready for dimpling. And obviously you want to do that so that the Pro Seal has a spot to adhere to. So you want to do that before you dimple, and I found that out the hard way when I started on the right tank skin. I accidentally dimpled it first and then marked up the skins, and it just eats through your pads like nobody's business. So when you do it, make sure that you mark up the skins first and then dimple. You'll save your Scotch pads and extend their life period tremendously. So I am working on both the left and right tanks at the same time as best I can. I'm doing all the prep work for all the parts simultaneously. Here I'm working on the fuel cap. You have to countersink the surface or the holes there for it, because it'll mount underneath the skin that's dimpled, and so you have to obviously make room for it. So one thing you want to make sure is that when you countersink it and you've dimpled the skins, go ahead and fit it up just to make sure that it sits in there correctly, because you obviously want that to be as flush against the skins as you can. I got my skins dimpled and then went back and realized that I had to countersink a little further. So these are the attach brackets for the inboard side of the fuel tank. The half of these will be in the fuel tank, and the other half will be outside the fuel tank where it attaches to the rest of the leading edge of the wing. In the instructions talk to after you're assembling everything, if you're going to prime any parts of it, make sure you don't get any primer on the portions that will be inside the fuel tank, so that way you don't get contaminants into your fuel. The process basically is you're going to manufacture some spacers that'll attach to the top and bottom flanges on the outside portion of these attached brackets, and that's what you see clecoed there. The spacers come in, they're all attached, so you have to cut them apart, and then you cleco them to the flanges of the attached bracket, and then trim the edges so that they're flush. And then once you get all that done, you're going to dimple them, you're going to size them correctly, and basically what they are is they're nut plate attachments. The top flange spacer actually has 5 locations for nut plates, 3 along the flange of this attached bracket, and then 2 that are away from it, or the spacer is basically twice as wide as the flange, and so it overhangs I believe the aft portion. And so the portion that overhangs, there's actually 2 locations for nut plates as well. One of the things that I learned or realized as I was putting this together is I had attached the nut plates and the spacer and the flange together before I put the nut plates, or the nut plates on the 2 areas where it overhangs. And because of the angle of the webbing of this bracket, you can't actually get anything in there to squeeze rivets into to attach those other 2 nut plates. So one thing I would recommend is when you do the upper spacer, make sure that you attach those nut plates, the 2 nut plates, before you attach the spacer to this attached bracket here, and you'll see what I'm talking about when you get to that point. It just makes it a whole lot easier. I ended up having to drill it back out for both the left and the right attached brackets that I'm working on to be able to put those nut plates in place. So just make sure you put those in before you attach the spacer to the attached bracket here. At this point, going through, you countersink all the holes on the attached bracket, so where the skins will sit, and so that's what I believe I was doing there. And then you're going to attach a flange bearing, which is what this is here, one to each bracket, left and right. And I'm not sure what the bearing is for. I haven't looked into the instructions to see what actually goes through or is using that bearing. But you attach that, final size everything, and then rivet in place. You don't need Pro Seal for this portion because it's outside of the fuel tank. And then the rest of this is going to essentially be attaching the rest of the spacers to the attached bracket and kind of finishing everything off. Now, like I said, I'm working on both left and right tanks essentially at the same time. I've started on the left tank. All of the parts like this, the brackets, the ribs, all of that stuff, I'm working both left and right at the same time. It's when I get to the actual tanks themselves that I will work on just the left or the right at one time, mostly because of the Pro Seal. I've started putting in the bottom skin stiffeners, and you have to Pro Seal them in place and then rivet them in place, applying Pro Seal to the hole before you put the rivet in. And then once all that sets, you got to put Pro Seal on the back side of the rivet just to make sure it doesn't leak. It's a pretty long, drawn-out process, and there's no way to do both skins at the same time. You'll put yourself in too much of a time crunch, and you won't get a very good result. So I'm getting all the framework prepared together, left and right, and then once it goes, once I get to the point of actual assembly of the tanks, I'll work on the left and then work on the right. But it just makes sense that as I'm going through each step, go ahead and do both sides at the same time, just to make sure I get everything done and have everything fresh in my mind. So if you come across a trick or something you want to make sure you remember for the other side, you're already in the process of doing it, so you remember, instead of doing a left tank all by itself and then a month later trying to go back and do the right tank and trying to remember all the things you figured out in the process of making the left side and trying to remember that a month later. It's easiest to do it all at one time. So now I'm finally attaching the spacers to the bracket, and this is where I realize that I kind of messed up at the end of this video here, and end up having to drill it all back out and attach the two other nut plates before I attach it to the flange. So I'm going to go ahead and let this video run out here. Again, for those that watch these, I appreciate it. If you get a chance, hit that like button down below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next time around.